When you first heard or when you first received the diagnosis, what happened to the MBA and the international contract?
Well, yes, I've spent some time thinking about it this week and thinking, first of all, oh my goodness, what have you let yourself in on? Now you're going to have to sit here and talk about it. And verbalizing it is different to it going on in your own head.
Welcome to Beyond Leadership, adopting a coaching mindset. In this series, our conversations aren't about biography or polished advice. They're about how decisions are made in the real world when the pressure is on. We'll anchor on one situation where the path wasn't obvious and explore what goes on in the mind of a leader when confronted with real trade-offs, imperfect information, and the need to move anyway. This podcast is brought to you by Peer Plaza. Human help, instantly. Lisbeth Fengel-Lloyd spent 27 years building a life abroad, raising a family and working in international schools across the UAE, Indonesia, and Brunei, always centered on inclusion. In 2018, she returned to Denmark and continued that work. Then, in 2022, just as her daughters had left home and she was preparing for an MBA and another international chapter, she was diagnosed with cancer. The plan stopped. What followed wasn't a pause, but a redesign. I want to understand how she made that shift when the future she had mapped out was no longer available.
What it is about, on a more philosophical perspective, is that what I've been is a middle leader, being a middle leader and wanting to go back to being a better qualified middle leader just didn't happen. So I sort of personally had to redefine what leadership is. And I have done that by becoming a self-employed person, because I think that is also a form of leadership.
Well, absolutely. It's a very important form of leadership. You're now leading your life, and you're doing that alone. You don't have a boss telling you what to do. So you're a supreme leader in that respect.
Well, yes, but the theory behind all of that and all that. But that, I think, is probably the angle. Very interesting. You've made me think about it again this week. And it's always good to go back and think, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think we do it enough, do we?
Well, some people do. Some people think too much, and other people just don't think enough. What about you? Do you think? Or how do you think?
You're going to put me on the spot now.
Yes.
I love it. And I do. Lisbeth is what I call a natural coach. She brilliantly asks me what I think, not for any other reason than curiosity. It isn't that coaches aren't curious, we are. But we can get so caught up in ensuring that we facilitate our clients well that our grounding in curiosity can sometimes get lost. Lisbeth reminds me how powerful, simple, genuine curiosity can be. I review. I certainly do. As a matter of fact, I've built a program for my team that at the end of each day, it's an attendance program because in Spain we now have to give our attendance to the government. It's not happening yet, but I've created a program to do that, or a platform to do that. And when somebody checks out, they can voluntarily answer 6 questions, and they can skip them. And I don't see the answers to the questions, and they do, and they can download them, and all the GDPR stuff that's involved with that. I've written some questions, and I also made it possible for them to alter the questions so they can ask the questions that mean the most to them. And the idea is that you end your day with looking back and seeing if there are the things that did you accomplish what you wanted to, what is the most important thing you want to do tomorrow. Important questions to consider. And then if you want to skip them, you can skip them, and they're only for them. And I really enjoy it. And I was very pleased when I heard that they liked it. They liked it very much.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, it was always voluntary, so they didn't have to do it. But the idea that they also enjoyed it and looked forward to it
Yes.
I think that's good. So I think it's important to at least be aware that you have that choice of thinking back or thinking forward. As a matter of fact, I just had a coaching session with a woman in Denmark
Okay.
who we were talking about calendaring and setting aside a day to look forward and look back. And she called it, and I asked her if I could use this, she called it looking out the window. Whatever you want to call it, stopping and taking stock of where we are in our minds, feelings, stress, agreements with others, priorities, etc., is one of the least valued tools in our arsenal. Building in that habit is gold, especially if you find yourself on the continuous hamster wheel of life. And I thought it was fantastic. The idea that you're just looking at the window and whatever thought comes up in your mind, you can jot that down or not. But just review a little bit what's going on in your mind.
Yeah. No. I think you're right. I think it's super important. As a teacher in the IB system, in my dark past, we've always had to end a teaching unit with asking the kids to reflect. And it's also been part of the current teaching thinking that the kids have to reflect on the lesson, what went well, what didn't go so well, is part of good teaching practice, and also reflect on the unit. What did you do well and what didn't you do well? And I'm going to say, though, that once kids have had to do this for example, 7 subjects over the week, and I don't mean to be crude, but they get really fucking fed up with reflecting, and they said, just let me get the work done and move on. And I guess the whole reflection thing is about choosing the important things to reflect on. I mean, maybe you don't really want to reflect on your maths lesson. I mean, who cares? Did you get the work done or didn't you? Perhaps not everything is worth reflecting on.
Totally agree. And again, it's really about awareness more than anything. It's about being aware that you can do that. And sometimes we need reminders to do that, but also reminders can be too much. Lisbeth makes a valuable point. There is simply not enough awareness around the immense theft of energy and concentration caused by software developers eager to addict you to their software, constantly reminding you of this and that. How often are you actually grateful for the reminder, and how often is it just a nuisance that you snooze without further thought? Being aware of these two types of reminders is a good starting point. Taking action against the latter can greatly improve your level of concentration throughout the day. But getting back to your situation and your restraint, you're diagnosed with cancer, and you decide that instead of going back to your job or finishing your MBA, you decide to start a business. Not too many people would have done that.
Yeah, but I mean, I did finish my MBA.
You did.
I did. But I mean, are we recording now? Is this our beginning? Because then I'll start waffling on about it, or if not, we'll take it when we get there.
We started 12 minutes ago.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, I tend not to announce we're starting now because it kind of kills the mood.
Yeah, of course it does. No, you're absolutely right. So I did finish my MBA. So the whole thing with cancer was obviously, it came at a time when my husband and I, he figures heavily in this, obviously, thinking, okay, this has been good. The kids have moved on. They are moving on their own track, and they're doing really well, and they don't really need us hugely. So what can we do with our time? We had thought a lot about going abroad again, taking up another international contract. And my husband had actually already started in Malaysia to set up an international school for Charterhouse School in the UK. So in any case, when
Sorry, quick parentheses about your husband. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about what he does or what he did.
So a long time ago, I met my husband in the UK, and he had just finished as an engineer at Rolls-Royce in Glasgow, and then he started moving on into physics. So I met him just at the beginning of his PhD in physics in the UK, and we spent a long time at Manchester because he was at Manchester University, and he started a couple of spin-off companies with the patents that he'd made. And then in 2008, we sort of thought, yeah, nice, but really what we would love to do is to pursue our passion, which was to travel and to travel with our children. And he also had a pedagogical qualification in his bag. I was teacher trained in East Manchester. And then we really had enough that we could move abroad, and we started in the UAE. So in the UAE, then Indonesia, and then in Brunei on Borneo. He's a physicist, and he's from Scotland. And when we moved to Denmark, we also had to sort of really find out what he wanted to do. So there's a lot of things in it. Also, Denmark is not hugely welcoming towards people coming from what is now considered a third country. So you have to be a little bit creative with these solutions. In any case, we had decided we wanted to do a little contract again, just a little flurry, and it was going to be Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Looking forward to going back to the heat, etc. I got a scholarship for an online MBA from a university in Tampere in Finland, and I finished my job here at the International School of Billund, which I don't know if you know, Michael, but Billund equals Lego. And
Yes, I do. Yes.
we all have these funny little hands, and we're all made of plastic. But in any case, I finished my job there, and I started my MBA online. And I started a little bit of Airbnb here in our house because it all seemed to work quite nicely. And then within 2 weeks of starting my online MBA, I had already been on my trip to Finland and met all my mates. I was diagnosed with galloping stage 3 cancer. And I was just so lucky that I was in a really, really great place for receiving cancer treatment. So for the next 16 months, I had a really fantastic service and help from the cancer ward in Esbjerg. And so I finished my cancer treatment, my preliminary cancer treatment, within 2 weeks of also finishing my MBA. So it also went hand in hand. And
Wow.
At the same time, my husband came home from Malaysia. Okay, what do we do now? We are 2 people, no job, and 1 cancer treatment between us. What do we do? So we established an Airbnb business here in Billund because Billund is hugely attractive in the summer. And for us, it worked quite well. It's a flexible solution. It gives us the room to do what else we wanted to do. And it meant, well, as I said, the operative word here is flexibility, and it gave us the flexibility that we wanted. So after the 16 months, when I was luckily finished with the cancer, I had finished my MBA. It was an MBA in educational leadership. I really had to make some decisions about what do I do.
Whoa, hold on a second. I think we missed something important here. The 16 months of dealing with cancer. After all, this is the constraint Lisbeth has been living with, and constraints are the theme of this podcast. But I get it. Lisbeth is not one to ruminate. She is quick on her heels, ready for the next adventure, and hardly glances back at the turmoil behind her. That says volumes about her priorities, her resilience, her outlook on life.
My past experience in terms of leadership was I had been head of faculty for an inclusion department at a very large and very prestigious school in Brunei called Jerudong International School. And I had been, as I said, head of faculty and really enjoyed the middle leadership role of having some absolutely fantastic teachers on my team who were really hard to make life easier for the weakest students in this very academic school. And I really enjoyed having the job of as I said, making their lives easier so they could do a better job for the students. So that was a large portion of my leadership experience, and I had to make some decisions. What do I do now? Do I go back into teaching? Do I go try and look for another leadership position, etc.? And I suppose my big constraint in this was that I probably didn't really feel that I had the huff and the puff, the energy to go back into teaching.
Now, pardon me, but you were in remission at this point.
Yes, I mean, technically speaking, I suppose I'm still in remission. I'm still receiving preventative treatment, and I will be for the next 8 years. But I'm not inviting cancer back into my life on any scale.
No, let's not do that.
They've put all my data into the big spreadsheet, into the big machine, and calculated that my odds are very good. So nice. I think that's really, really good. It's really, really lucky. I really feel like I've been super lucky to get all the help that I needed at just the right time in my life, and being able to find some flexible solutions.
Paradoxically, lucky is a word Lisbeth uses 8 times in this brief chat. Her gratitude might be construed as something she gained from beating cancer, but I think it played a great role in how she beat it.
Being my own boss, I think, was useful because I wasn't pushed back into a job at a time when it didn't suit me. So I was able to take things nice and easy.
On the one hand, obviously nobody wants cancer.
No.
On the other hand, it kind of stopped your life for a bit for you to think about what you wanted to do in your next chapter instead of just following along your path. Do you feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're right to say I didn't invite it in. I didn't want it, but it came. And I certainly think that the universe had something else, a different direction that was 180 degrees different to what I thought it was going to be back in 2022. So yes, not what I expected, but it's what I got. And then I really feel I was super lucky that I was in a situation where I could make the best of it. Because I had worked, my husband and I had worked and for long enough and accumulated enough experience and resources that we could choose our own path. And I know that this is not the same for everyone. It's not a lot of people have to go back into a situation for economic reasons, obviously.
Sure.
Have to go back into a situation that they might not like and they might not feel is the new direction that they want to take. But in my case, I was just really lucky that I was able to go in a new direction and follow. And I think the new direction came largely as a result of my MBA studies, because as part of the MBA studies I did, I completed what was called a Rees motivation profile at the beginning of the course. And much of the work throughout the course related to me as a leader in the light of my profile, or the profile that I was given as part of the Rees motivation profile. And it taught me a lot about myself. For example, it taught me a lot about how idealistic I am. That made me see that perhaps this is why in education I've sometimes felt frustrated at things not going the way that I thought they should, particularly because I have always, in my teaching career, I've always worked with the weakest students and had strong opinions about how we should look after them. And I could see with the outcome of this new profile, it did teach me, I can see that there are some things here that will always frustrate me in a job. And this has later on, this whole profile has later on led me to think, well, maybe what I really should do is try to take the best of my work, that what I have felt was the best in my job in middle leadership, take that and turn it into my own business. What a privilege.
And now a quick word from our sponsor, Peer Plaza. Ever wish you could just talk to someone who's been where you are? Not a chatbot, not ChatGPT or Gemini. A real human who gets it. That's Peer Plaza. Human help. Instantly. Whether you need a career coach, a leadership mentor, or someone to help you navigate a tough transition, Peer Plaza connects you with vetted professionals ready to help right now. Browse profiles, watch intro videos, and book a session. Just like that. Visit peerplaza.com, because the best advice still comes from real people. And so what is your business now?
My business is new. It's a baby. And I coach and I am a consultant for companies, small to medium-sized companies. And as I said, I've carried on the idea of the Reese Motivation Profile, and I use it as a tool to help inclusion in the workplace. Because once you have completed your profile, you have a lot of words to use to talk about yourself, to verbalize yourself, to put yourself into words. Also in Denmark, just like many other workplaces in the world, we have conflict occurring, and we don't really know why. And I'm not necessarily saying that people want conflict in the workplace, but they find them happening without knowing why. And I can give by way of example myself. I have found out that I'm hugely idealistic, and therefore I get frustrated when I don't see the best things happening for my former students. And this is something that will likely always occur, because that is a part of me. It is what drives me. It's not necessarily wrong, but it can frustrate me if it's not met, if it's a need that's not met. So that is my company. I help people discover what drives them, what motivates them, what gets them out of bed in the mornings, and what frustrates them at the end of the day. And I do this for people, and I do this for companies.
You know, I'm curious. You're saying you're frustrated sometimes because you can see a better way of doing things. How does that come out in behavior?
Well, that's interesting, but I think perhaps in my past, in my previous school in Brunei, I felt it was very easy, because I felt like I was being listened to, and leadership listened to me and took heed and would come and ask me questions. And in the essence of it, we all want to be heard in one way or another. And I think I get frustrated if I feel that I'm not heard, because I feel I have a lot of experience in education, broad experience and long experience, broad from different systems, long and broad also because I have taught in probably 5-6 different countries in the world in various systems. I write exams for the IB. I feel like I do, in a lot of ways, know what I'm talking about. So it's frustration.
And then the frustration, is that something that you are working on? It's something that because as you said, it's a part of your life, probably is not going to go away, because you're going to notice these things. You're highly attentive to these types of issues. How do you deal with that? How do you manage that?
Well, it comes from a form of idealism, as we said. And in my case, as I said, this was really my turning point, in that I'm trying to set my own business up so that I'm not part of a system where I go in and I see the system and I feel frustrated. In the previous jobs I've had, it's always been about setting up systems for the weakest students in the support systems, or improving on the support systems. And that's not an ideal situation for me. I understand now. So therefore, I feel that if I can be my own leader, work in my own company, and be heard, or feel like I'm being heard, then I will be happy.
So instead of trying to change people, you changed environment.
Yes, I think that's it. Instead of trying to change the people or the system in the places that I work, I have chosen to step out of this um, and try to change the environment instead.
Do you think you might have ended up doing that even if this incident hadn't happened in your life?
Oh, that's interesting. No, I don't think I would.
Hmm.
I don't think I would because very likely, I probably would have just changed the place that I was working at. When I had my cancer diagnosis, I had already started a change process, and I knew that I wanted to get away from a system that I felt was frustrating. But I just didn't know why it was frustrating. But
Okay.
I knew that it was. So the process that I've been through in the last 2 or 3 years has taught me a lot
Hmm.
about why I was feeling frustration and where it came from and what my own needs are really in order to be a bit happier.
Can you help us with an understanding of this methodology?
The profile, do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so I really, really like this profile. So as I said, this is something I started my MBA with online because my course director is is also very big in the Reese motivation profile in the Nordics.
Hmm.
And the point of it is Dr. Reese statistically evaluated that in common, we all have 16 motivators, 16 drivers that drive our values. And this is something that's pretty common to everyone, but it works on a sliding scale. So if we take, for example, one driver, and that could be something like status, you might be statistically in the top 2%. This is just a statistical tool. Once you have responded to the 128 statements, it will tell you where you are on the sliding scale compared to the rest of the population
Wow.
statistically. Right. So it might tell you, Michael, that for you, you are in the top 2% of the population for whom status is important. And that means that I can use it to predict your behavior. It
Hmm.
means that, for example, means that you will always go for a job that will give you status symbols, and it will mean that you will always go for an opportunity to show status because that is what works for you. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just the way you are. It's like
Right.
a
It's how,
fingerprint.
how somebody's wired.
It is just your wiring. It could also be, Michael, that you sit in the bottom 2% of the population. And that means that you will never, ever choose an option that gives you more status. Or you could be in the 20% that sort of sit a little bit in the light blue zone. Or you could be very average, which means that it depends on which team you get into. If you then work as part of a team where status is important, then you will probably choose to go with the flow. So we're like this on 16 different parameters and
Hmm.
it spits out numbers. The reason why I love it is it doesn't give you colors. It doesn't tell you a label. I did one of those profiles and it told me I was a popcorn brain and I was yellow. And I said, okay, well, what am I going to use that for? So also because I come from a world of teaching, and we're really trying to move away from giving kids labels. I much prefer the idea of a fingerprint, and I really like working with people and them understanding, oh, okay, yes, this makes sense for me. This is why I acted the way I do. And it also makes people understand that just because it works for Michael and his values work for him, that doesn't mean that they'll work for Lisbeth. Michael's values are his and my values are mine. And I can't expect you to live by my values.
When you talk about this, I'm wondering how young this begins. At what age do you form these values? And if they change over time, my instincts tell me that they're formed quite young and that they don't change too much over time. But you're the pro, you tell me.
So the thing is that when this was created back in the 90s, Dr. Rees said, no, this does not change over time. You only ever need one profile because you is you. Um, but we know now much better we have a better understanding of the brain, and we know that we're more plastic than we thought we were. But yes, I agree. I think it starts very early on, and I think it's a mixture of nature and nurture. I don't think it's just one thing, but obviously our values are very much shaped by our parents.
Sure. I mean, Eric Berne in the 60s talked about the five drivers,
Yeah.
and it sounds like there are some similarities to this, but it extends it to a much more granular level so
Yes.
that you can really take a look at yourself and understand why you are the way you are, or maybe not why you are, but you can understand how you are.
I think this is the crunch of it, though, that this profile tells you why you do the things you do, whereas, and this is obviously not to talk ill of other profiles, but other profiles will tell you how you do things, not why you do it. So I think this one lends a little bit more depth. And I can give you another example. It's of a young man I was working with. Young, he was 27, and he was
Yeah, that's
he
young.
didn't. What's that?
I think that's young.
Yeah, exactly right. But he was talking about how he's got a big job in a big company in Denmark. He really loves his job. It pays him loads of money, so he's super happy. But he didn't understand why he was struggling with his team. He did the profile, and we understood that he has a very low need for tranquility in the mind. He loves the change. He loves the challenge. And that means that he would come into work on a Monday morning and he would say to his team, I've had this great idea. We're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and it's going to be fantastic. And he could see that there were team members who were upset with him. And you also know, Michael, that in Denmark, if someone in your team is upset, they will let you know.
Yes.
They're not going to hold back on that one. So he didn't understand. He couldn't see.
I'm sorry. That's a beautiful thing, by the way. It's a shortcut.
Yes, it is. It is. We don't hold back. So he could see that there were people who were really upset by this situation, but he didn't understand why. So we talked about it, and he says it's super exciting with all these ideas that he's got of making things better, new systems. But actually, he was neglecting to see that there are people in his team who want to finish a job before they moved on to the next one, because otherwise they were going to get belly aches.
Sure.
They needed the peace of mind of one job done before they could move on to the next one. And he just didn't see that.
You know, I'm just thinking of David Allen. He talks about the mad scientist and the bean counter and how you want to travel along the diagonal between those two, the X and the Y axis, and you want to travel between that diagonal most of the time. You know, some personalities are mad scientists. Hello, that's me. and then there are people who are more bean counter-ish. And if you know that you're more of one or the other, then you're looking for a way to equalize that. And it sounds like with your framework, you can find out where you are so that you can at least understand why people interact with you the way they do. You may not want to change that about yourself. That's up to you. But at least you can understand that, hey, if I go too much in this direction, I'm going to piss people off. Yes. And if you feel like doing that, you go ahead. But you should be aware of what's going on. And you're bringing out the awareness of this.
Well, absolutely. This is it. So if I look at my own profile, I would say I'm probably the furthest, my highest motivation, my strongest motivation perhaps is curiosity, which means that it is almost to the point where it's non-negotiable. I will always try and find out more, which really annoys other people who are more pragmatic, who just want to get the job done.
So are you taking out your phone at dinner and looking up the date of that happening?
Yes, that's me. I will say, let me just go and Google it. Yes.
Well, we don't Google anymore, do we now?
No, we don't.
We ChatGPT it, right? Or whatever, Gemini or whatever. I want to be agnostic here.
No, you're right. You're right. But I am very, very curious. I know I'm driven by curiosity, and this is part of the work that of why I enjoy working with people. I'm very curious about people.
You're certainly well suited for this new occupation that you have. I want to ask you, do you ever have people guess where they are before they take the test?
Yes. And it is, I find that it's something that we don't really know, because very often well, in my experience anyway, very often we know what other people have said about us. And that is usually the story that we tell. Well, my parents said that, blah, blah, blah. So therefore I must be, etc. So usually when we think of ourselves, we think of ourselves in terms of other people's feedback to us. So sometimes people are surprised. And usually the risk motivation profile, you have to get into your head and you have to keep reflecting on it. It's not going to give you the answers in one day. You'll keep coming back to it and thinking about it. And usually people will say, it makes sense. It's not set in stone. For some people, it's a surprise. But most people will say it makes a lot of sense to them when they think back.
Sure. And just because it makes a lot of sense to them doesn't mean there isn't huge value in seeing that. It's like you have if you don't have a mirror, you can have a feeling of how you look, right? You can touch your nose, you can touch somebody else's nose, and when I touch mine, I know mine's bigger than the other people's noses. But still, having the mirror is very helpful because it says, yeah, I was right here, but I wasn't so on spot here. I wonder how that's affected my relationships.
Yeah.
I wonder what I can change here to increase my affinity I have with these people over here. So there are so many things that you can do once you know what's going on and have some evidence of that. So it's no longer an idea that you have about yourself. Now it's evidence-based, which can, I think, be very helpful.
Well, absolutely. This is exactly it. It is something that gives you data, and the data it gives you is how you responded to those statements compared to how the rest of the population responded. So that's all it gives you. It is just statistics. There is absolutely no magic in it. It is just numbers, and it gives you the words to start thinking about and start talking about yourself and start thinking about where the conflicts have been in the past and where they're likely to be in the future.
How does somebody practically work with you?
So I have B2B and B2C. B2B is me going into the company. Everyone in the company or allocated a profile would complete the profile. I would give a 60 to 90-minute feedback session where we would talk about a variety of things. And the things that we would talk about is, this is what the profile shows me. Does it make sense to you? And usually people say, yeah, that's surprisingly accurate. And then afterwards, okay, so if you say that this is true, you have, by way of example, a huge need for acceptance. How does that affect your daily grind? How do other people view you if everything you do is about gaining acceptance from the group? Or how do you view other people who are opposite to you? So in those 60 to 90 minutes, that's the sort of conversation that we have. What does it mean? What does it mean for your life in the past, in the future? What does it mean for your relationships? And it could be your work relationships, or it could be people in your team, or it could be your private relationship. It also gives you a personality report, a relationship report, sorry. So it gives you a lot of information like that. So there's a one-to-one, and then there's if the people in the team agree, then there's the work with the leadership and saying, this is you as a leader. How do you affect your team? As a leader, how do you put a good team together? So, for example, if you have a team that consists of people who are highly competitive, or you have two people in your team who are really motivated by competition, They will, if you put them into a customer service role, they will very soon feel frustrated, or even worse, get into arguments with the customers who are ringing up to complain, because they're competitive. They want to win. These people probably need to get moved into a sales position instead, a sales role. So that's the sort of work that I do with leadership, then talk about who have you got in your team and how do you best make use of them? How do you grow a collaborative relationship? How do you diminish the conflicts? So that's a B2B model. And then as a B2C model, it is Michael does a profile and then we meet. It could be digitally or it could be physically. And again, it's a feedback session of 60 to 90 minutes, happily followed up by another one in 3 months' time when people have had time to think about what it actually means for them. And I think this is really relevant for people in a variety of ways. First of all, because it's all about values. What are your values? Where did you get them from? And how do they conflict with other people? It is relevant for a lot of the expats we have in Denmark, because values is a good way to get to know the Danes. Danes have certain values. If you come from India, for example, and you're here as an Indian programmer, you have different values. Why are your values making conflicts with your team or the people in your team, right? So that's one way. The other way to work in the workplace is, for example, the younger people, the younger professionals. In our experience, they have a big need for more coaching. They are interested in developing themselves, and in my experience, they often find when their leader is my age, so 50, 60, etc., there's suddenly an issue with the younger ones wanting to talk about themselves, wanting to develop themselves, meeting dinosaurs like me who don't really know what this whole thing is about. Sure. So the young people speak one language, the older people, like me, speak a completely different language. So it is about inclusion through having a common language. And I know we don't use the word inclusion in the workplace, but this is what I would do at school. When I work with students and getting them included, it was about enabling them to talk about themselves, talking about what they can do and what they can't do, so that they can verbalize themselves to the teachers.
Tell me why we don't talk about inclusion in the workplace.
Oh, I don't think we don't like to use the word inclusion. We do like well-being instead, particularly also in Denmark. We like to use the more technical terms that are a part of the whole ESG reporting that we have to do for Europe, right? So inclusion is a word that we use in school, but when we are older, we like to use the word well-being.
Okay, good to note. I'm just thinking about your journey and how you went from being a teacher and somebody who got their MBA and took a left turn, and now you're doing what you're doing today. Sounds like you were first handed almost a death sentence, but then it turned into a gift.
Well, yes, and this is perhaps something I'm not reluctant to talk about, but again, it is. I think I've been incredibly lucky to be able to do this, and I'm acutely aware that not everyone is in this lucky position. So yes, I think I have been lucky enough in that I've been able to turn into something good.
And you did turn into something. You did look into yourself to understand, okay, I have a new lease on life. What am I going to do with that? Well, am I reading into that, or did you feel that way?
No, absolutely. And I think you're right that I was given some tools in my MBA that allowed me to look into myself. And I also had to, at the end of the whole treatment, I also had to be a little bit realistic. Well, what am I actually capable of? I don't think a job in teaching or a job in inclusion, I'm not really sure it would have been the best choice for me, because as everyone knows, being a teacher is hugely demanding, physically and mentally, and it takes a lot of energy to do a good job of it. So I'm just extremely lucky, I think, that I have been able to take what I think is my best work from previously and distill it into my own job. I've made my own job. taking the best from the past. And I think I'm hugely lucky.
Lisbeth, I want to thank you so much for our talk today. It was wonderful to see you again.
Thank you.
I hope it wasn't too painful.
For inviting me. I'm very flattered that you invited me.
Oh, well, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, and have a wonderful weekend.
Oh, okay. Thank you, and you too, Michael. What are your plans?
For the weekend, well, actually, we have great plans. We're going to Palamos, which is a small fishing village on the Costa Brava, where we have our weekend home, which we haven't visited in 3 or 4 months now because we did some renovation.
Oh, no.
It's not a very big apartment, but it has a very big terrace right next to the ocean. So it's quite nice. But the renovation we did was a 2-meter by 2-meter bathroom.
Oh.
And it took 3 months.
Oh, Michael, I totally believe it. It is not easy.
Mañana, Spain. I want to thank Lisbeth Wenger-Lloyd for joining me and sharing her story with such honesty, lightness, and courage. Her perspective on cancer, work, gratitude, and choosing of her environment gave this conversation real meaning. Thanks to my guest and to all of our loyal listeners. Subscribe today so you don't miss upcoming conversations. And if you found this podcast valuable, please leave a review. It helps others discover the show and keeps the dialogue growing. For more information about Scale U and Scale U retreats, go to scaleu.org, where you can find the full library of podcasts, blogs, and additional resources. Thanks for listening. See you next time.